Hey everyone, welcome back to DJ's Corner, Just My Opinion. I am your host, DJ. And if you've been following along, we've been diving into the world of Venom, exploring his origins and the motivations that drive him from villainy to anti-heroism. Today we're tackling a big one. What makes Venom such a complex and I dare say sympathetic character? We're talking about the layers beneath the black symbiote and the reason why fans see him as more than just Spider-Man's adversary. Now, let's get one thing straight. Venom is not your average villain. He's not out there plotting for world domination or robbing banks for the sheer hell of it. At his core, Venom's character is shaped by pain, rejection, and the relentless need to belong. Eddie Brock, the original host we all know, is a man whose life was crumbling long before he ever bonded with the symbiote. He was a disgraced journalist, shunned by society, and battling his own inner demons of anger and resentment. The symbiote, on the other hand, was discarded by Spider-Man, feeling abandoned, feeling betrayed. The two broken souls found each other, and suddenly, their struggles were no longer their own struggles to endure. What makes Venom so compelling is this idea of duality. Eddie and the symbiote aren't just partners, they are reflections of each other's pain. Eddie feels powerless in his human form, and the symbiote amplifies their sense of power when they are together. But it's not all smooth sailing. There is a constant battle for control, a push and pull between Eddie's desire to do the right thing and the symbiote's darker urges. This internal conflict is a huge part of what makes Venom relatable. Who hasn't felt they're fighting against their worst impulses, trying to do better even when everything around them seems stacked against them? Now I have a couple issues to break down if you were curious to understand more of what Venom and the symbiote was going through, if that makes sense. So the one I want to touch on is Venom, the Hunger. It's a 4-issue ministry published in 1996, written by Lee Kamaski with the art done by Ted Halstead. It's one of the darker Venom storylines, both theme-wise and especially visually. It digs deep into Eddie's mental and physical struggles with the symbiote. At this point, Eddie isn't fighting Spider-Man or any other villains and shit like that. He's fighting his own body, his own urges, which is literally rejecting the symbiote in a grotesque and horrifying way. The story The Hunger takes a whole new concept and takes Venom to an entirely different level. It's not just about Eddie's mental hunger for vengeance or redemption. It's about a physical need to consume, driven by the symbiote. In this arc, Eddie finds himself struggling with intense cravings. The symbiote is causing his body to rapidly deteriorate, leaving him weaker and worse, desperate. The hunger for human flesh becomes almost overwhelming, and Eddie's control over the symbiote starts to slip. At first, Eddie tries to fight this hunger, but the more he resists, the more intense and disturbing the cravings become. The symbiote parasitic nature is consuming him, literally. This arc does a great job showing that Venom isn't just a monster on the outside. The real horror comes within. Eddie fights his body's growing need to feed. What makes Venom the Hunger so captivating is the way it explores addiction and self-destruction. Eddie's relationship with the symbiote in this story is very much like an addiction. He knows it's dangerous, he knows it's hurting him, but he can't break free from it. This metaphor is made painfully clear as Eddie's body and mind begins to break down. He becomes more desperate. His senses of right and wrong becomes clouded by his need to survive. The symbiote amplifies Eddie's worst impulses, and we see him teetering on the edge of losing himself completely to the hunger. What's fascinating is that Eddie Brock isn't the only one suffering. The symbiote itself is also struggling, as it's trying to sustain itself through Eddie, but can't seem to keep them both alive. This creates a disturbing symbiotic relationship where neither Eddie nor the symbiote can function without each other, but together they are slowly self-destructing. The horror of Venom the Hunger is that it shows how dangerous this relationship has become and how toxic and codependent Eddie and the symbiote truly are. In the end, Venom the Hunger leaves us questioning whether Eddie could ever truly break free of the symbiote's control. Is he destined to live in this cycle of hunger, desperation, and violence? The story paints a Venom the Hunger was crazy because it made you forget that you're even reading a comic book. It seems more like cinematic. Even in the illustrations, the artwork, and the graphics that they use, it's amazing. Reading it, it was like watching Predator, like Arnold going after Predator, and they know each other and they think alike, and one needs the other one because they get a thrill of the hunt, like type shit. It was a really crazy 4 little comic book series, but it's really good because it really breaks down how toxic their relationship is, but how they found a way around it to benefit both parties. Like, you got to read it. The Hunger is absolutely amazing.
Venom, the Enemy Within, is set in a dark underbelly of New York, where a demonic presence is causing chaos. The Demogoblin, a supernatural villain with a twisted sense of justice, has been targeting the innocent. And Venom, of course, being a lethal protector, he is not about to stand by and let that happen. But quickly, things take a horrifying turn when Morbius, a living vampire, is thrown into the mix. Now you have Venom has to navigate not only the growing threat of the Demogoblin, but also an uneasy alliance with Morbius, a character who's just as feared and misunderstood as Venom. The story kicks off with a series of brutal murders in New York City. And not long before Venom and Morbius are caught in the crossfire, the Demogoblin, the main antagonist, is a twisted version of the Hobgoblin, but with demonic powers that make him a true terror to face. His mission is to purge the world of sinners, but in his eyes, everyone is guilty. This sets up a dangerous situation for Venom, who, despite his violent tendencies, sees himself as a protector of the innocent. What's really interesting about The Enemy Within is how it brings together characters like Venom and Morbius, both of whom are seen as monsters by the world around them. Venom with his violent methods and Morbius with his vampire-esque hunger are forced to work together to take down the Demogoblin. And while they're on the same side, there is tension between them throughout the entire storyline. Morbius doesn't trust Venom's brutal methods, and Venom is suspicious of Morbius' bloodthirsty nature. It creates this tense, uneasy alliance that adds so much depth to the story. The horror elements are dialed up in this arc, with the Demogoblin power causing real fear and chaos in the city. We see Venom and Morbius face off against nightmarish creatures, and the artwork leans heavy into grotesque imagery. There are some brutal fights, and the stakes are high, not just because of the physical threat of the Demogoblin, but because Venom and Morbius both struggle with their own monstrous natures. This storyline also plays into one of the central themes of Venom as a character: redemption. Both Venom and Morbius are characters who walk the line between hero and villain, and The Enemy Within forces them to confront what it means to be a monster while still trying to protect the innocent. Venom's protective instincts kick in high gear when Demogoblin starts targeting people of New York, but his violent tendencies constantly threaten to turn him into the very monster he's trying to fight against. One of the key moments in this arc comes when Venom and Morbius confront the Demogoblin in the final battle. The city has been turned into a war zone, with the Demogoblin using his demonic powers to wreak havoc. Venom and Morbius has to put aside their differences and truly work together to stop him. The tension between them makes for some great character moments. Venom's brute strength and Morbius' calculated approach balance each other out in the epic showdown against the demonic villain. At its core, Venom, the Enemy Within, is about how far Venom is willing to go to protect the innocent, even when he's up against forces far beyond anything he's faced before. The horror elements combined with the supernatural villains and Venom's ever-present struggle with his own nature makes this one of the darker Venom stories, but it also has a great look at Venom as a protector, even when he's viewed as a monster.